Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Kasper.
Over the weekend, Matt LaFleur reported. So, funny story. I was watching some hoops. Okay, I was watching some hoops Saturday night at the Sodtech Center for Blue Gold basketball, and our good friend Rob Domofsky, who covers the Packers for ESPN, was there because his son plays for the Blue Golds. And Wes Hodekowitz from Packers.com was also there. So watching the game with him, and that's when the story broke. Rob's like tweeting and writing and such on his phone and taking some phone calls and that. So that was kind of interesting to kind of follow along with that. But anyways, so that happened on Saturday night. LaFleur getting the extension. I know the Packers haven't officially announced it yet, but it's a done deal. Because it seems like Packers are waiting to maybe officially put that out there and announce LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst, and Russ Ball, their contract extensions all together. So I know there's a lot of Packers fans that are either upset about it, annoyed about it, frustrated about it. I mean, it is what it is, okay? I could make case, like I said before when this whole thing, I can make a case for, I can make a case against. We'll see how it pans out. But it was interesting yesterday with the Sean McDermott firing because there's a lot of parallels that you could say between the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott and the Green Bay Packers and Matt LaFleur, where it is clearly evident that the Buffalo Bills didn't think Sean McDermott was the guy to lead them to the Super Bowl. They got close, but not close enough. They didn't get over the hump. And it's clearly obvious that the Buffalo Bills thought McDermott couldn't get them there. And I know there's a lot of Packers fans pointing to what the Bills did and wanted that to happen for the Packers. And I can't argue with you with your parallels, with your comparisons, because there's a lot of similarities to it. I can't argue with that. It may be a little bit of a risk for Buffalo to move on from Sean McDermott. We'll see who they bring in. We'll see who they hire. But it definitely, you look at that and like, man, you got Green Bay keeping their head coach for a few years, signing him to an extension. Buffalo's like, not good enough. Now, I don't know if this was part of the decision when it came to Buffalo and that, but it's like, do they look at how the AFC playoffs, who made the AFC playoffs this year, and they're like, if we can't make it this year, we can't get to Super Bowl this year. Is it going to happen with the current regime? Because you didn't have the Chiefs in. And that's been their bugaboo. They didn't have the Baltimore Ravens in. And then you look at New England won the division. So I don't know if that's where, you factor all of that. And obviously we saw what happened in that Denver playoff game and that, but I don't know if that was a little bit of a frustration point with ownership in that. It's like, okay, Chiefs didn't make it, Ravens didn't make it, and we still lose a division, and the Patriots look like they're going to be back. And it looks like the Patriots right now are probably going to go back to the Super Bowl. Sorry, no offense, Denver, but with no Bo Nix, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Jared Stidham. But that being said, I completely understand where there are some Packers fans saying, look at what Buffalo did. That's what Green Bay did, because there's a lot of parallels to it. There's a ton. So I do think, though, this is LaFleur's final contract with Green Bay if he doesn't get to the Super Bowl in the next couple years. He has got to at least get to a Super Bowl, because you look at the coaches that have been a head coach for the same amount of time, like the longest tenured coaches right now with their current teams right now. You got Kyle Shanahan, you've got Andy Reid, you've got Sean McVay, and Zach Taylor even with Cincinnati has been there same amount of time as LaFleur. They have all been to at least a Super Bowl. Shanahan's been to a couple, hasn't won. McVay's been to a couple, has won one. Obviously, we know about Andy Reid. Zach Taylor's gone to a Super Bowl, lost to Sean McVay. So even though he's got that extension and it's not what's being reported out there is a prove it type of deal, which I'm okay with, because I also think this would help attract potential new coordinators and new position coaches. They don't want to maybe go to Green Bay for just 1 year, essentially. But I do think that if LaFleur does not lead Green Bay to at least a Super Bowl appearance in the next couple of years, then he's out. And I probably would agree with it. Because you look at the other coaches with the same, amount of, longest tenured coaches, and LaFleur is now up there. Those guys have at least been to a Super Bowl. Green Bay's got to get to a Super Bowl. So if he doesn't in the next couple of years, I think he's out. And I probably would agree with it, not knowing what the reasons potentially could be that they didn't get there and such. But it's going to be really interesting to see what he does with his coaching staff now, which is going to, the big decision now is defensive coordinator. Where is he going to go? Who is he going to bring in? We've got one report already that he's bringing in Christian Parker for an interview. Christian Parker interviewed for that position, for that same position with Green Bay a couple years ago when they decided to hire Jeff Hafley. Now, Christian Parker is currently with the Philadelphia Eagles. He is their passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Before that, he spent some time with the Denver Broncos as their defensive backs coach, and he spent some time with Green Bay. He was actually a part of Matt LaFleur's original staff as a defensive quality control coach. Before that, he had spent some time at the college level. But he is a Vic Fangio disciple, if you will. Obviously spending time with Vic Fangio over in Denver as their defensive backs coach, then going to Philadelphia, becoming their passing game coordinator and such. And you look at, it's like, okay, look at the defensive backs that he's worked with and helped develop. Patrick Surtain. Look at what he has done with Philadelphia, especially with Cooper DeJean and such. What's one of the biggest weaknesses on this Packers defense? Maybe looking at secondary outside of Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams and Javon Bullard, but definitely their corners. That's a possibility. He is a rising stock. He is interviewing for the Cowboys defensive coordinator position. But that is a name that has kind of been out there for the last few years and such as a rising stock. I know he's probably not a big name that a ton of fans know about, but would it surprise me if they look at him and bring him aboard? I guess the question that's going to be really interesting too is with Matt LaFleur, I would say, again, he's got a couple years, I feel like, to get this team to a Super Bowl. Does he elect to go with a defensive coordinator with no experience? Or does he bring in an experienced defensive coordinator? Which way does he go? That, to me, is going to be kind of an interesting one. If he does go with the experience route, I would imagine that Raheem Morris is probably going to be at the top or near the top of his list. He's good friends with LaFleur. They've worked together before. He has coordinated a championship defense with the Rams. Plenty of defensive coordinating experience across the board. That would seem like the most. If you asked a lot of people, I don't know if there's betting odds for this thing, but if you asked a lot of people, okay, who's going to be the next defensive coordinator for the Packers? It's probably going to be Raheem Morris as, I would say, odds-on favorite, because you kind of connect a lot of dots, right? You connect a ton of dots there. And let's just throw it out there. Jimmy Leonard, who interviewed with Green Bay before and turned it down reportedly to return to Wisconsin. He is now with Denver, working on the defense there. It's a possibility. I know Leonard was doing some interviews with the Jets, I believe was one he did. Cowboys reportedly were interested in. Right now, wow. But right now you can't talk to him, you can't interview him because Denver is still in the postseason. So can you be a little bit patient with that? Obviously, you look at that, and that's going to be a fan favorite. You change his name to Bob Williams from Notre Dame. Is he probably getting as much attention from Packers fans? Probably not. So obviously there is, and that's not to dismiss how good of a coach Jimmy Leonhard is. It's not. But it's obviously a name that every Packers fan, every Wisconsin sports fan knows. And he's got a good resume. He's got a solid resume. Be curious if Matt LaFleur, even though that Jimmy turned him down a few years ago, reportedly, would he make that call again? You throw this couple of these names, I think, would be big wild cards, and odds probably not happening. I'd go Brian Flores is his name. He's a free agent. Okay, he's a free agent defensive coordinator right now. He's probably still looking for head coach opportunities. He's a favorite for the Steelers opening. But if the Steelers don't hire him, is he looking at these other options and such and saying, maybe I'll wait another year and getting back in the cycle? Buffalo would be an intriguing one, too. Buffalo has got to be, I would imagine, a top-tier destination. It's curious. Like, I would love to know Stefanski and Harbaugh with Buffalo opening up. Do they? I mean, Harbaugh's getting, $20 million per year, so he's probably not regretting a whole lot there. But still, I mean, talent-wise, come on now. But Brian Flores would be kind of fun. I would think that would be short-lived, but maybe in the other case, too, is if he can't get a job in this cycle where there was 10 openings, maybe he won't. I don't know. But that would be an interesting one to just go across the border, a proven defensive coordinator commodity. Jim Schwartz, right now with Cleveland, Cleveland would have to release him from his contract and such. A lot will depend on who the new head coach is going to be over there. Heck, Jim Schwartz could be the new head coach for Cleveland. But wouldn't that be a fun one? Former Detroit Lions head coach coming over. Look at what he has done with Myles Garrett and such, with all the talk about Micah Parsons and, if that's a goal and such. Having now Jim Schwartz as his defensive coordinator, I'd be all about that. That you want to talk about intensity and bringing a little bit of juice and emotional juice. That's Jim Schwartz. That is 100% Jim Schwartz. I put the odds on that one happening pretty small, like a Brian Flores, but I would at least consider it as a possibility. Another one that's probably, I'd be curious to see if this one, because Matt LaFleur a few years ago did sing the praises of him going up against him when the Packers were preparing going up against the Giants. Wink Martindale, defensive coordinator for the University of Michigan. Probably know him more during his time with the Baltimore Ravens. But if Matt LaFleur wanted to bring in a veteran defensive coordinator that I don't know if there's going to be any more potential head coaching opportunities for him, but a veteran guy, come in an aggressive style of defense, likes to blitz a lot. Would that be a possibility? You bring in a veteran guy that just controls. You don't have to worry about, him kind of taking over the defensive such. That would be a name potentially out there too. Some other names that have defensive coordinating experience that did interview with Green Bay a couple of years ago that potentially could be available right now. The Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator, Bobby Babich. He interviewed with Green Bay. He ended up going to Buffalo. Zach Orr interviewed with Green Bay, defensive coordinator with the Baltimore Ravens. Denard Wilson, Titans defensive coordinator, interviewed with Green Bay a couple years ago as well. Those are teams that will have new head coaches. Depending on if those new head coaches decide to keep them or maybe those coordinators want to move on, Green Bay has interviewed them in the past. So you would wonder if that's going to be possibilities as well. Maybe I don't think this one would get too many people excited, but I guess you kind of look at connections and dots. Gus Bradley right now is with the 49ers as an assistant head coach. Longtime defensive coordinator in the league, head coach, former head coach and such. Would that be a possibility? Maybe, but just because he worked under Robert Saleh. So you look at connecting dots, right? Connections and such. I don't know if that would be one, but I guess never say never. Matt Eberflus is probably going to be mentioned with that. I hope that one doesn't happen, but I had to throw that one in there. I wouldn't be on board with that one, to be honest, but he's a former defensive coordinator, former head coach. He's available right now. We'll see. I'd throw in Joe Witt Jr., former defensive coordinator with Washington. Now, I'd be more open to him, I guess, coming back to Green Bay. Long-time position defensive backs coach for Green Bay. Charles Woodson sung the praises of him when he was with Green Bay, a long-time assistant under Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy brought him to Dallas under Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn took him to Washington to be his defensive coordinator. Dan Quinn, though, took over defensive play calls this past year. They moved on from him. That one I'd probably be more open to if it was like a position coach, but again, throw it out there as a possibility. I know Packers fans are going to be clamoring for Al Harris, who's currently with the Chicago Bears right now. And you look at Al Harris's coaching, background and the stops that he has made. He worked a little bit with Kansas City. Worked with Mike McCarthy in Dallas, defensive backs coach. Then obviously this year with the Chicago Bears as their defensive backs coach and defensive pass game coordinator. It's an impressive resume. But again, if it wasn't a Packer, a former Packer, how much attention would he probably be getting? I don't know. But if you look at the resume itself, yeah, he's got experience. Would that be an option? Would that be a potential option? And then you kind of look at some of the names that are currently on the team, on this Packers team. And I know this is probably going to be one that Packers fans do not want to see. And honestly, I'd probably agree with you. But you look at, is there anybody on their team that they could promote from within? You got DeMarcus Covington, who is getting defensive coordinator interviews, requests for interviews and such, former defensive coordinator with the New England Patriots. He is their current defensive line coach. I'm sure he'll get an interview just because it's kind of what you do. But also, Derek Ansley Jr. was a defensive coordinator with the Chargers. So those are just some of the names. I know Sean McDermott's going to be out there. I would be shocked beyond shocked if Sean McDermott settled for a defensive coordinator position for this year. If anything, if he doesn't get a job this year, it could be the Mike Vrabel, the Mike McCarthy route. You take the year off and you go back into the cycle. Remember, too, it's been a while, been a hot minute since McDermott coordinated defense, called defensive plays and such, too. So I'd put that as a very, very, very low chance of happening, just in my opinion. Those are some of the names that are being potentially floated out there that are probably going to be rumored to be attached to Green Bay. And I honestly think that this is an attractive job for potential defensive coordinators. Why wouldn't it be? You get to work with Micah Parsons. You have Xavier McKinney. You have Edrin Cooper. You got a lot of pieces on that defense that you should be excited about. And you're going to obviously be the play caller on the defensive side because you're going to be working under an offensive-minded head coach. You are going to be essentially the head coach on the defensive side. It is an attractive job. But I think the big question here for Matt LaFleur is, does he want to bring in an experienced coordinator? Or is he willing, maybe more wants that up-and-coming position coach and handing it off to a first-time coordinator? This will be the fourth defensive coordinator under Matt LaFleur. When he got hired, Mike Pettin remained on staff, experienced defensive coordinator. After Mike Pettin, Joe Barry called plays before. Jeff Hafley, former head coach at the college level, but, then first time defensive coordinator at the NFL, but had that head coaching experience. So you kind of look at that trend. Maybe he leans that way a little bit more to a more experienced coach. Not sure how this is going to play out. I really don't have a good idea. It seems like Raheem Morris would be the obvious pick, but how many times, do we assume the obvious pick is actually going to happen? Definitely going to be interesting to follow, and I think a lot of Packers fans are going to be very curious and going to be following this hire very close, very close.